I'm Alana, the occupational therapist.
And I'm Jen Brown, speech language pathologist. So we'll start on the slide that begins with goal. As members of the Clearview School Division Student Support Services team, we work under an inclusive framework. This means that all of our goals center around keeping students in the general classroom and supporting and building their ability to participate in the general curriculum. And we do this by working as part of a collaborative team. Our collaborative team includes the classroom teacher, who is our team lead, speech language pathologist, occupational therapist, educational assistants, principals, and other disciplines who might be involved with that student. As a team, we each have our own area of strength and expertise, but we work very closely together with all of these domains. Our expertise overlap in most areas, which leads to a really strong and holistic approach to problem solving. So together, we might consider how a child is doing in each of these areas, and then with the teaching staff, come up with an intervention for a particular student. And because there are so many areas of concern, each child's intervention looks very different, as our strategies will change to suit their individual needs. I will say that this is a sampling of the domains that Alana and I work in. It's quite an exhaustive list, but we just wanted to touch on several, so you're all aware of the vast area of needs that we attempt to address.
And then in terms of students that are of interest to us, our supports are open to all of the students. We are in every school in the division and have students on our caseload from even our colonies. And although our caseload naturally has a large number of students with disabilities such as autism, Down syndrome, and global developmental delays, our supports are beneficial to all students, as every student has their individual strengths and weaknesses. So I think you'll see our caseload a little later, but the truth is when we are in a classroom for a student who has been referred to us, we're also looking at every other student in that classroom, because that classroom has its own interesting dynamics and every student contributes to that. So we have to look at every student. So we might provide recommendations for students who aren't on our caseload, as well as the student that we are there to see. And then we wanted to touch on classroom skills because this is an area we work a lot on. Most of the kids that are struggling at school aren't struggling because they are not smart or because of their fine motor or gross motor needs, or even their speech and language concerns. They're struggling because they lack necessary skills to participate in a highly structured environment such as the classroom. And these skills overlap with a number of domains, such as the ones we highlighted in our previous slide. And these are things such as receptive language, expressive language, executive functioning, and social and emotional development. And all of these areas are where we do significant amount of work to make sure students have classroom skills. And we have a story for what that kind of looks like.
So for an example, we've chosen one of our students from grade 3, and we will name him Johnny to protect his identity. Johnny lacked the skills to participate in his classroom. Johnny is pre-verbal, which makes it really difficult for him to communicate his needs. He will occasionally use his communication device, but this is difficult. As a result, he uses behaviors to try and get what he needs. Johnny has a lot of sensory needs. Lights and sounds are hard for him to tune out, which makes remaining in the classroom challenging. Johnny has some executive functioning concerns. He is a very concrete and inflexible thinker, which makes understanding assignments hard. He performs at a lower level than his peers, and because he is unable to speak, it's hard to know what he understands and knows. Prior to our interventions, Johnny was spending the majority of his day in a dysregulated state and fleeing from his classroom. He would avoid his educational assistants, communicate physically through hitting, kicking, biting, and headbutting. He spent a large portion of his day avoiding work by laying on the ground. The majority of his academic programming occurred in his workroom, which was a closed-off, attached room from his classroom, where it was a struggle to get him to attend for longer than 30 seconds before he would flee to a hallway. Johnny would become fixated on items if he was denied access to them, and he would disrupt the class, and communicate his wants physically. Johnny's team had access to many tools, such as his alternative communication device, the sensory room, some visuals, and headphones, etc. However, they had never really received sufficient support to use these tools effectively. His team felt very discouraged because it felt like Johnny was miserable all day, and it was a constant struggle for him to do anything. They reached out to us to assist them in programming that would allow Johnny to spend more time in his classroom, learning and participating in a similar manner to his peers. They shared with us that they have been struggling with these issues ever since kindergarten and had seen little to no improvement. They felt very worried about what the rest of his school career was going to look like.
So what we did when we came in is we introduced a new framework, including new models for understanding Johnny's behavior in a different way. And then with their input, we problem solved how we could implement our plan into their classroom. And this involved several meetings spanning across the months of February and March. And when the team felt ready, we spent a full 2 days in the classroom with the staff coaching and modeling how our intervention should look. So essentially, we pretended to be the EA that day, and they got to watch what we did and ask questions. Our primary goal for Johnny was to get him regulated, and we did this by designing a regulation space where Johnny could go when he was overwhelmed. So we simplified Johnny's day completely. He was either at his desk working, and when work became too difficult because of his sensory issues, his executive functioning issues, or his language impairments, he could choose to go regulate. And this was because as the inclusive support team, we guided them in this goal because we understand that Johnny needs to be regulated in order to learn. It's crucial that he learns to regulate to allow us to continue to build and address his other goals to further his success. So this intervention eliminated his fleeing and his avoiding behaviors. His physical behaviors decreased, and it increased the amount of time he spent working at his desk. So his teacher had set an expectation that he would work for 30 seconds before he would get a break. And on day one of implementing this intervention, he worked for 20 minutes before he chose to go regulate. And he came back to his desk independently and again exceeded everyone's expectation. And this cycle repeated throughout the day with minimal resistance to the significant changes in his programming. So as a result of Johnny spending so much time working, we were able to integrate fine motor skills into his work. We were able to demonstrate how to successfully use visuals and pictures, demonstrate appropriate use of his communication device, and change how verbal instructions were given, as well as demonstrate how to modify his work tasks to be more concrete and engaging to help him understand better. So that's one example of what we've done for some of our work, and a lot of our students, it looks very similar to that, but we chose to highlight Johnny because his needs covered so many domains. So the next thing we thought would be fun would be to invite you guys to engage in some challenging activities that challenge executive functioning, fine motor, and language so that you guys can get a sense of what it's like to be Johnny and how we would help you. So if you guys are game for that, we'd like to do that next. So the first thing is called a Stroop Test. So this is challenging your language processing, your reading, and mainly your executive functioning. So what we want you to do is read this list, and when you read it, say the color of the word, not the word. Does that make sense? You can just give me a thumbs up that we understand. And try and do this as fast as you can, and then we'll ask for some feedback. So ready, set, go. Oh, was that enough time for everyone? Yep. Did everyone find that challenging, or does anyone think that was easy?
It's a little tricky.
Yeah, very challenging. So this is an example of what it feels like to be Johnny every day. He has to filter out all of these responses, such as you guys filtering out the response to say yellow instead of red, all the time. And this happens when he's reading, when he's trying to communicate. So he might say yes when he means no. And that's really frustrating for the teaching staff, because then they don't actually know how to trust what he's telling them to do. And he feels frustrated because he can't communicate his needs. So then we become dysregulated. So what Jen and I would do is change this task. We would modify it to be easier, and we would add some visuals. So we're going to ask you to do the exact same thing, and it's the exact same list, but this time we've modified the task a little bit and we've provided some visuals. So ready, set, go. Give me a thumbs up if that felt a little easier. So that's kind of the sort of thing we would do with any given task that Johnny has to do. We would look at it, look at what it requires him to do, and then think about how we can decrease the cognitive load that he has to face every day. So the next one I have for you guys is a fine motor challenge. So this is fine motor and it's executive functioning as well. So I'm going to back up so you guys can see. And I want you guys to copy what I'm doing. And I want to see your guys' hands in the camera so I can see how this is going for you guys. So the first thing you're going to do is a fist, then the side, then the palm. And I want you to do this as fast as you can. Good. So let me know, did anyone find that easy? Give me a thumbs up if it was easy. Okay, we got Guy, felt like that was easy, and Daryl. So that for Johnny would be similar to asking him to hold a pencil. So a task that we take for granted and we think is simple, because he struggles with fine motor and executive functioning issues, it's actually very challenging for him. So then we would come in and teach them how to do some fine motor supports, if that makes sense. And then we have one more.
So I just have to push the thing, right?
Yeah, it should work.
So just providing an example of verbal instruction and how we would modify that. So similar to the Stroop test, the color test that Alana just did, just giving you guys another example of how visuals would be applied into a classroom to improve understanding of the task and successful completion of the task. So if everyone can have a listen to this and try to complete the instructions that you hear. Nothing.
Did you guys hear anything there? Oh, try and click it on this one.
Ata tu zapato.
Okay, I'll play it one more time.
Ata tu zapato.
So if you guys could try and do that for us, it's an instruction.
Anyone?
Challenging.
Awesome. So given that example, we are unable to comprehend that. So Johnny would feel the same. Given instructions, multiple instructions, just throughout his day, this is how we would modify that task and provide him with a visual. So this is what we are asking you to do. Would everyone understand what we were asking, being provided with this visual prompt? Awesome.
So that is all we have for activities. Unless you want more, we can scrounge up more. If not, we will pass it to Grant.
You're leaving Johnny frustrated here.
Thank you very much, Jen and Alana. That was great. And the last two slides of Jen and Alana's presentation is the data piece. So that's my part of my work, and all referrals come into this office, into my office, and I process them within 24 hours is the goal, to make sure that they're ready for Jen and Alana to work with. And so what you're looking at here, that pie graph, is a raw data. So the numbers in the pie are the raw students who are actually receiving SLP support from Jen. And as you can see, the total number is 188. So when you look at that circle graph, you'll see that Stettler Elementary is out of 188, 36.2% of the referrals of students who are receiving support are from Stettler Elementary. That's what that percentage represents. When you go over to the table where it shows schools and percentage of the school population, now this was curious for me because Jen and Alana shared with me the sweet spot percentage. And the sweet spot percentage, generally speaking, an average, is approximately between 10 and 15% of a school population. Now that can be up or down depending on the school. And of course, if a school is smaller, those numbers may be skewed. That may impact that. But that just shows you that at this current time, as of last week, that is the school population, a percentage of school population that are receiving that SLP support. Alana, would you move to the next slide, please? And the last slide of data, folks, is the similar, but for occupational therapist, recognizing that Alana started with us in schools approximately December. And so as of last week, her current caseload was 89. And likewise, you can see the percentage in the pie graph it makes sense. Stettler Elementary has the bulk, the largest percentage of that 89 as being referred for occupational therapy assistance. And likewise, over in the table, the percentage of school population is the number of students who are receiving, or the percentage of students rather, that are receiving that support. And Alana, could you proceed to the next slide, please? And folks, that concludes the formal piece of this presentation.